Welcome back to the Successful Working Parents podcast, the podcast where we talk to successful working parents. We are still working on the title. My guest today, she is a former tech partnerships executive. She is the current host of the It Gets Late Early podcast and a mother of two. Ladies and gentlemen, Maureen Clough. Maureen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tone. First of all, I'm glad you're thinking about the title because I'm not sure I'm on the right podcast. Because let me tell you, most of the time I feel very far from a success. So
Well,
there you go.
that's totally okay. That's what we're here to talk about today. So let's get right into it then. So first of all, you have two kids, right? So when was your first kid born?
I was 32, so that was in 2015. So I was not quite geriatric pregnancy status. That's 35 apparently, and I snuck in there right there at 34 with my second. So
Sure.
32 and
Yeah.
34.
Yeah. Shout out to my wife who gave birth at 34 as well. Snuck it in.
All right, nice.
So in 2015, tell me a little bit about your career at that point. What are you doing during the day?
Yeah, so during the day. Yeah, so during the day I was working at SAP Concur. It had been Concur. Those were beautiful days, and then SAP came in and acquired us. And so I'd been working actually building a partner channel from scratch there at Concur, and the channel was consisting basically of value-added resellers, consulting firms and the like, and driving business to Concur. So,
Yeah. So what was it
yeah, it was
like
great.
that first transition? I assume you took some time off, of course, when you had your child. And so what was it like
Oh
going
man.
from working to working parent?
I mean, I don't think people talk about this enough, which is why hats off to you for starting this podcast. It rocked me. It totally rocked me. I mean, your whole life you've been told you've got to just climb that ladder. You got to keep killing it. And I had this pressure internally to keep making it, right? I thought that I had an expiration date in tech because I looked around and there were no older people. I was like, where do they go? I mean, do they
Yeah.
disappear? Like I was sincerely concerned about this. And so when I had my child, I knew obviously I would be taking time off, but it rocked me to my core because I thought, well, who am I? Right? I've been chasing this career path and suddenly my life is just not about me. And
Yeah.
there's all of this fluff and this beautiful narrative that's given to women about what it's going to be like to become a mother. And it's all flowery and beautiful, and yes, that stuff is true too. But in this day and age when women typically, I mean, we live in a society where a two household income is like pretty much a necessity, right? Like it's not really a choice whether you have to work, it's more of just what you got to do to make it. I mean, we don't talk about what it's like to have to shift your mindset and understand who you are as this new identity as a mother. And so I was completely and wholly unprepared for the shifts that I would have to go through. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And it didn't help that I couldn't sleep, to save my life because my kid was up every freaking hour. So it was it was really tumultuous. And I mean, I was the first of my friends to get married, even though I was like a child bride. I was 27 when I got married. And I was the first of my friends to have a kid. So I had no one to whom I could turn for insights or guidance. And I felt like completely marooned on my own island. And I was
Yeah.
like, how am I supposed to do this? So, I took my maternity leave. I grappled with that. I'd been so proud of what I was able to fortunately build alongside other wonderful people and leaders at Concur. And it was really part of my identity. And so letting go of that, even to take care of the most wonderful being on earth, my little baby, was super hard. And I couldn't help but feel like left out. All the stuff I'd been working on, all the stuff we've been doing, I had to miss and I'd see unfold in front of me on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. I mean, you're up all the time with a baby, and I had
Mhm.
countless hours to like scroll my phone and watch Netflix. And when I would scroll, I had such intense career FOMO, like I cannot even tell you. So
Yeah.
it rocked me.
Sure. So how did you cope? I know you don't feel like you did, but obviously you did. You're here. You made it. So what are some of the strategies that
Yeah.
helped you get through it?
Well, first of all, I'll say that the human brain is a really incredible thing because I freaking don't remember almost any of it. So it's maybe that's PTSD, brain, just forgetfulness, allowing us to move on with our lives and not be hamstrung by that. I don't know, but I can tell you that I did join, a parent support group that was actually a little bit helpful because, like I said, I didn't have any other friends who had babies at the time. So even though these were new people to me, these were strangers to me, the fact that they were in the very same stage that I was dealing with this brand new newborn that didn't come with a, parenting handbook
Yeah.
was nice. So
Yeah.
that was one way I coped. And then, gosh, I mean, I just took anyone who would offer help, I'd say yes. Like, and that's my best advice to new parents. Like, just say yes. Just say yes to any offers of help because humans weren't built to do this alone. It's supposed to be a community raising a child. And in our day and age here in this society, we just like do that really shittily, right? Like, we just don't do it, basically. It's like, good luck to you, you know? And I wish people were more open and honest about that because it's really freaking hard.
Yeah.
So,
I've been getting, been getting to know you over our last few conversations, and I could tell you're definitely, you're a hard worker and you're definitely entrepreneurial, and I think kind of a type A person. So, did you have to let go of some of that stuff? I assume you were very ambitious in your earlier career, and so did you have to let go of that? Did you find a way to still rise the ladder, or how did you balance that?
yeah, I mean, I don't think I ever was ever able to fully let go of it. I think it was something that was pretty core to who I was. And again, I think a lot of it was fueled by, frankly, fear, which is a fantastic motivator, as it turns out. But, I kept on thinking if I don't do this by a certain age, I won't have a chance and I'll be obsolete. And so I had that pushing me. So it never really completely went away. And I guess again, I'll say take as much help as you can. Try to outsource as much as you can. But what's really, really not great about our society is there's this level of shame that I think women have about not doing everything on their own. I mean, because once again, the messages we've received from forever are motherhood is a golden time. It's wonderful. Enjoy every moment. Bub. I'm telling you, don't enjoy, you will not enjoy every moment. In fact, a lot of moments suck. And young kids are really, really hard. And you will be
Mhm.
sleep deprived and you will be worried about all sorts of things that you can't even conceive of before you're a parent. I'm sure you can attest to that. But
Yeah.
when it's the best analogy I've ever heard, and I believe that this is probably something that everyone will have resonate with them, is that it's your heart beating outside of your body. That's what it
Mhm.
is. So it's not about you anymore, but you have this other being on whom, I mean, this being relies on you entirely. And it's just the stakes are that much higher. So there's so much pressure, and there's pressure to do it right. There's pressure to do it well. You don't know what you're doing. You have no experience, right? So it's a really tough thing to navigate. And I'm I feel that recently I've heard a lot more open conversation about this. And again, like hat tip to you for doing this podcast because it's a really important subject that we talk about what the realities of being a working parent are and help people through them because it is not for the faint of heart. And you can see that because a lot of people are like, I'm out on having kids. That does not look fun, right? Like there are
Yeah.
tons of people now who are choosing to do that. The birth rates are descending rapidly. So
Yeah.
it's a big deal. It's a really, really big deal. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's, gosh, I don't
According,
even know. I don't know how I can say I've done in terms of coping. I feel like everyone's just kind of just muddling through, which saddens me because this is the one shot we got here, right? And
I mean, I think that's a apt metaphor for life, right? We're all just sort of going, we're all just trying to figure it out day by day at the end
just
of the
try,
day.
yeah,
Everybody you see on the
totally.
street is just somebody else that's still trying to figure it out. But yeah, I mean, some of the things that you find to cope really do help. And I think that the way you're able to frame what you're doing helps. And the big thing I hear a lot, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on it, is giving yourself permission to not be an A plus, right? I think it's just like being okay with not crushing it in both things.
Yeah.
And it's something that I have to think about as well because I've also been fairly ambitious and I'm having to dedicate time to my family. Of course, I don't mind doing that, but you have to kind of not show up as a superstar at all times anymore.
It's really true. And it's hard to accept that. And I think it's probably harder to accept that for men, I would guess, on average, because the messages that they've received in society is that they have to be all in, they have to be the breadwinner. Obviously, that's changing, things are shifting, and we have dual household income earners, all of that. But I think that there's still the societal expectation that really handcuffs men into thinking that they have to be the one crushing it. And so it's probably even worse for them when they realize, hey, I got to step it up at home and help out here because it's frankly, I think it's likely to be something that actually hurts you in the workplace if you're open and honest about your parental duties. And that's, again, why I'm so thrilled that you're doing this podcast, because you have to break the bias against men as caregivers. It's critically important. And by the way, like, women need you guys. Like, my husband's a great partner in that regard. And that is by design. I didn't sign up to have children to become a martyr. I signed up to have
Right.
children with someone who I knew would be a good partner and an
Yeah.
equal partner in raising them. So I think, being able to do this sort of a podcast, having this conversation openly with men, letting them say, hey, I'm going to go pick up my kid at daycare, like openly discussing that at work, that's how we're going to get to gender parity. That's everything.
Yeah, I mean, I always joke that I'm like the domestic house husband, and I do the cooking and the cleaning, and my wife knows if she wants
That
to
is
be
awesome.
if she wants to be the breadwinner, I'll be the stay at home dad. I've already floated that
Perfect.
by her, so we've got that on the table. I think we're seeing living in Manhattan with a kid probably need to both have a job at the moment, but
Whew, that's tough.
yeah,
Used to
but
live in
she knows.
Manhattan, so I know.
Yeah, it's that's been an interesting part of the journey as well. But so I want to give you space to also talk about where you're currently at in your career, which is I don't know how you would describe it, but I'll let you describe it.
Okay. Well, it's an unfolding journey. So we'll see where it goes. I'm open to where it takes me, but ultimately the genesis of where I am today is over the course of working in tech for as many years as I have now. And by the way, I'm 40, and I'm saying that openly, proudly. I'm 40 years old, which is something that unfortunately I feel like a lot of people aren't going to self-identify as, but especially in this tech industry. But over the course of many years in tech, I recognized that there was a real scarcity of people 40 plus. And I started having conversations with my peers just off the cuff, like, hey, have you noticed this? Are you worried about this? Have you thought about, aging out of this industry? And turns out I was far from alone. Like, a lot of people had this nagging sense of dread, this overwhelming sort of sometimes in some cases pretty paralyzing fear of like what's going to happen, right? Like, how I don't see people like me. And it started to fascinate me. So I started sort of pouring myself into researching it and, read everything I could get my hands on. Turns out there's not a ton of data out there. So I'm trying to get more, but really kind of read the room on it and realized that this is the last frontier of diversity, equity, and inclusion that's not part of the equation at this point. And, 92% of DEI initiatives don't have age, despite the fact it's an underrepresented group within the tech industry. So, with the graying population, with people not having kids, like, we need to open our minds to experience being a good thing in the tech world rather than like looking solely for the fresh, young, hungry, inexperienced grads that'll be cheap hire. That's sort of the grind mentality. So I just got really curious about it. So I started a podcast because, as you know, anyone can start a podcast, and it's amazing that you can, share your insights and certainly learn from. I mean, again, I'm not an expert on this in any way, shape, or form. I'm just a guide on a conversation point that I think really matters. But so I started that. I started iterating on that about almost a year ago. I would say it had been in my mind, and so I started making little baby steps, and it was terrifying. I'm sure I'm sure you felt the same way. Like, doing
Yeah.
this was really, really scary. But the good news is, as an older person, I have less and less concern about messing up because I've done it so much and I'm still breathing. So I'm
Hmm.
like, you know what? It's never going to be good enough. It's never going to be perfect. Like, I just have to put it out there. And so I did in May. So it's been really wonderful. I feel like I've learned so much on the topic, and it's really opened my eyes to a lot of people's experiences, and I can't wait to see where it goes next. I'm hopeful that it will have other sort of spin-off iterations. So
Yeah.
that's it. But along the way, I had been employed actually during the making of and the launching of this podcast. But I was one of the tech layoff casualties of late for an incredibly short stint at a tech company. So it's become my full time job. So maybe again back to the concept of your of your podcast title being successful working parents. I mean, some people might look at what I'm doing and not think I'm working. I assure you, it is work, but it's just a different kind.
Absolutely. No, I think everything that you're doing is work, and of course, being a mother is work as well.
Yes, it is the hardest kind.
When did you first start to notice this age discrepancy or age challenge in your career, and maybe an example or two of how you think it might have impacted you would be helpful.
Yeah, so I started it. I guess my first foray into tech was when I started at Bloomberg, and I looked around and I just saw a sea of people like me. a sea of young 20 somethings. And part of that was that I came into basically a college feeder program, a grow within the organization, Bloomberg sort of college aimed program. So that's absolutely part of the reason why. But despite that, I mean, Bloomberg had famously open offices before open offices were ubiquitous. It was like there's no title, there's no leader, everybody's at the same level. That was their concept. And so it was also all about, transparency, meaning like incredible surveillance tactics. I won't get into that. But I looked around and I was like, where are the older people? Like, they don't really exist. Like, I didn't really see people over 40 at Bloomberg. And granted, I was on the tech side, so I don't know about the news division, but I looked around and that was my experience. So it kind of planted a seed in my head, like, gosh, is this something that I need to worry about? But as you probably can attest to as well, or I would imagine many people can, like, I never thought I was going to get old. Like, I thought that was a problem for someone else, not for me. Like, I was going to be 25 forever, obviously. It just wasn't
Right.
going to happen.
Yeah.
So it was in my
I still think
brain.
I'm 25.
Right. Me too. I identify as a 25-year-old, but
Yeah.
sadly I'm not. Um,
Same.
yeah. Although I say sadly I'm not. I'm actually thrilled to not be 25. I love being 40. But anyway, but so I noticed it, and then I recognized that. So after that, I moved back to Seattle from New York, and I started working at a series of startups, some of which are household names now, like PitchBook and Zulily. And then I worked at Concur, and so that was a market leader in Concur, a market leader in Bloomberg, a larger, more mature company. And I realized that I saw this pattern regardless of maturity or company size. It was something that I saw at every single organization, not just where I would have, intellectually expected it to be, which would be in the small VC-backed startup world, right? So that was something that just constantly, I think, was part of the reason I had ambition. And I don't know if I can divorce the two, like how much of it was fear of my own hide, of being left behind, of not having a role or a seat at the table in the already male dominated tech industry, and how
Yeah.
much of it was, oh gosh, I just really want to achieve. I can't answer that. And I wish I could. But I know that a lot of what pushed me to achieve was a sense that I wanted to make a difference for women in the tech industry, and that if I didn't keep going despite the difficulties therein, what chance do people behind me have, right? So there was part of that sort of sense of duty, if you will. And then part of it was like, oh my gosh, if I don't hit VP by 40, like, I'm a has-been. Like, I will be put out to pasture. There's no chance for me in tech. Because you see it. If you can't see it, it's the same thing as any other sort of diverse aspect of an organization. If you can't see it replicated in the people around you, you wonder if you are included, right? You wonder if you can make it.
That's an immense amount of pressure to feel and I guess put on yourself as well. Like at one
Yeah,
point, at what point do you just say like maybe I shouldn't go down this path then, right? Like did
exactly. That's where I am now. I'm like,
right.
is this for me? And
Yeah.
what my hope is that there's just a rebranding that's necessary, and experience needs complete a complete change in terms of its way it's embraced or not embraced in the tech industry. And so that's what my current mission is. It's really, let's redefine what experience means. Let's put the value that it deserves on there. And then also, I want to point out that I love younger people. I learn tons from younger people. I have friends that span all, I mean, not all, I probably missed a generation or a decade in there somewhere, but I have friends across the whole group. And I know there's so much value to be delivered at every step of the way, even from people fresh out of college. They know stuff that I don't. They have perspective that I don't. And so my feeling is that organizations should have an age diversity sort of concept. They should embrace people across a spectrum of ages, and that's going to make them better. So I don't want to suggest that I don't think people should be hiring young and new talent. They absolutely should, but they should also be hiring experienced talent.
Yeah.
So
Do you like TikTok though? I think that's really the barometer.
yeah. So I don't really understand TikTok that much. I realized that for someone like me, who, by the way, I was diagnosed with ADD, inattentive type at age 36. So that's new and makes so much sense, so much sense. But I realized that for me is just a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for me to like rabbit hole down for hours. So I've kind of intentionally tried to stay away from it. But unfortunately, the reality of our world is that if you want to spread a message, oftentimes you have to kind of be there on those different platforms. It might not be your platform of choice, but you might have to just at least have like a straw man presence. So I realize that I do need to go there. So
Yeah, I mean, if you struggle with being distracted. The endless scroll that's perfectly curated to your brain will definitely be a huge problem.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
I'm guilty of it too. I've actually found really what's really helpful is you set a screen time. If you have an iPhone, you like a screen time thing,
Good
and it like
hack.
snaps you out of it. Like after like 15 minutes, it, like snaps you out of it, and then you even just being reminded that it's been 15 minutes like makes gives you a pause in the never
Yeah,
ending screen suck.
that's a
So
really good
little
point.
pro tip for you. Yeah. Well,
But
I
you
would like
have the
to maybe
self-restraint to say bye at that point? That's the question.
sometimes, sometimes no.
Yeah.
Sometimes I press one more minute, and sometimes I press
Yep.
15 more minutes. But it helps me. It's more than not having it for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But I do want to talk to you actually a little bit about the ADD diagnosis and what that was like,
Sure.
just from from I think it'd be interesting to hear how you feel like it may have affected you as a parent and how it affected you obviously as a worker as well.
Oh, ADD, I really it's labeled a disability, but I do think it's also a superpower. I mean, some of the most creative people in the world are ADD, right? And
Sure.
it's just a very misunderstood thing. It means that you have a certain set of skills that other people don't, and vice versa. I mean, if you put me in a job where I'm supposed to fill out a spreadsheet all day, I would be fired in a day or quit or something. I mean, that's not where I should be. That's not my highest and best use.
Yeah.
So it for me it really sort of qualified why I felt the way I did about certain tasks and why I would excel in some and just like miserably die on others. So it was kind of like uncovering a map to who I am, right? Like it just everything made so much more sense when I realized it. And my parents even were like, "Well, yeah, duh, but you were always a high achiever." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you guys knew!" But yeah, it's just it's been I've been sort of a creative people person type my entire life and been gravitating towards the arts and more creative endeavors, which I think is why I was drawn to partnerships because it was such a people centric piece of the organization. It was the creation of something new, building bridges. It really it worked for me, and I loved it.
Yeah.
Um, so I found my path through trial and error and wound up in where I believe I'm at my highest and best use within a tech organization. And I really do love the work there. It's very inventive and fun to see it take off and very heavily reliant on relationships and people. So
Sure.
that's been great. But to answer the other part of your question about how it's impacted me as a parent, tremendously,
Yeah.
tremendously. I've been learning so much about the sort of symptoms of ADD and how it manifests itself in the way in which you parent. And every time I read about it, I'm like, check, check, check. Oh, yeah, well, that makes sense. And it doesn't necessarily feel good to see it because you realize, like, for example, like your inability sometimes to focus on what your child is doing, to like get on the ground and play with your child, that sort of thing. Like you wear that, you feel bad about it. And we all have a million things on our plates as working parents, right? We even as non-working parents, you just need a break too. And it's like it explains why that's difficult for me, but it doesn't necessarily make me feel better about it, if that makes sense. It's not like I use it as an excuse. It's just an explanation. Okay, so maybe this is harder for me than the average person because I'm sorry, playing with Legos for the 15th time is like not that interesting, truly. So it's hard to channel your focus when it's not something that's, actually you're passionate about, right?
Sure. Yeah. No, that's fair. It's not the most
Right?
stimulating the 10th time. I
No.
understand. Yeah.
No, but one of the misnomers about ADD is that, oh, well, so and so can focus on XYZ passion of theirs for hours, so they couldn't possibly have ADHD. Wrong. That's actually a symptom of ADHD. Like
Yeah. Right.
I can go down a rabbit hole forever on something I really care about. It's getting me to sit down to do some drudgery that's the tough part, right? But you live and you learn and you figure out how to outsource as much of the drudgery as you can. And that's why you work on teams that have different people of different skills and strengths. That's why you support people around you shouldn't be exactly like you. And that's, again, another reason diversity is so important.
I also wanted to go back to career a little bit. We were talking earlier about gender roles and having more parity there. And so I haven't spoken to any mothers who are going through not being fully employed. I have spoken to a couple of fathers who've been dealing with that, and that has its own mental challenges, right? When you think about the societal role of how you're supposed to provide as a man, as a father. I'd love
Absolutely.
to hear how you see it and how it's affected the way you view your role as provider and your role as as parent and partner, and just what it's been like for you on that front?
Yeah, I mean, I feel extremely lucky in the sense that I am not scrambling right now, in the sense that I do have health insurance because my husband is employed. If I were a single parent, it would be an entirely different story. And, every day you log into LinkedIn and you see these stories of people across your network and beyond, far beyond, and it breaks your heart because you realize people are really suffering right now. And so I don't feel like I'm an appropriate spokesperson for the mass of people who've been laid off, because I'm just very fortunate to be married to someone who actually has health insurance and has an income at this moment. That could always change, you never know, right? But at this moment, I'm doing okay. I think I tend to leverage humor, dark humor at times, as much as possible. So I try to just I try to laugh about it a little bit. I mean, gosh, I just got laid off twice in 1 year. Are you kidding me? Like, what? This is horrible. But there are plenty of people for whom it is not even a joke at all. And so I want to recognize that, because this it's even for someone who's in a situation where they're not super stressed out. It's not great. You don't feel great about it, even if there are extenuating circumstances that had absolutely nothing to do with you. The tech giants that and all the different SVBs, all that stuff, like the VC world, all of that has more of the overhiring during COVID. Like, all of these different factors have much more of a part to play than anything any of our employees at any of these companies ever did, right? So
Yeah,
um, there's that, and I know in my gut it wasn't something that I did, right? So that helps. But I think that it's really hard when you have been told that you need to keep on achieving and climbing the corporate ladder, and you've been just imbued with that sense that that's who you are. So you do still, I think, even as a woman who also has a working husband, like, I can say that it's not the easiest thing. And let me put it this way: if I hadn't already established that I wanted to launch this podcast and I was going to work on this podcast and actually launch the podcast, I'd probably feel entirely differently. Like, because I have this other thing into which I can basically throw all of my energy and my passion and my focus, I feel like it's been a lot easier for me than it probably has been for a lot of other people. But
sure. And I appreciate you saying that. And I had my own experience with a layoff in the past, and a lot of it is really psychological, right? Like, your physical
yeah,
safety for us, right, is not in danger, and maybe you have some money in the bank, and if you have a partner that's working, like, it's not actually nearly as bad as it feels.
no,
But at the same time, your psychological experience is very real, and I want
yeah,
to honor that as
no,
well.
it's
That
true.
was
Thank
a
you.
big part of it for me.
Yeah, no, I think it really has weight, and you only know your own experience and your own life and your own path, and so I just think it's important to have the perspective of the way it's impacting other people too, but also still feel entitled to, like, going through the feelings wherever you are, right? So,
Yeah. No, I
um,
mean, I think you certainly are looking at it the right way. I think you're spot on with that for sure.
thanks. I
When it
try.
comes to your career, so how old are your kids now?
They are 8 and 6,
Okay, so they're
a little older than yours.
online. They're online humans, right? They understand the world a little bit. Like, do you think about how they see? I mean, some of the stuff we're talking about. Do you think about how they see the way that you approach work, and like what mom and dad do for work, and just like the way you think about career and things like that?
I don't think they really get it,
Yeah,
because we're working from home, right? Like,
yeah,
we are privileged enough to not have to leave our homes, right?
sure,
Sometimes I don't think of it as much of a privilege. Sometimes I'm like, can I please get out of here?
yeah,
But I don't. I think that has been challenging. I will say, for my kids to really understand. If you're physically gone, that's one thing. Mommy's going to work. Mommy's going to work next door, the closed door doesn't work, right? They
yeah,
don't get it, and so
yeah.
it reminds me of that, like, once viral video of that guy who was on, I don't know, CNN or something, and he's sitting there talking on camera live, and his kids like run into the frame. This is all pre-COVID. Did you ever see that? It's like this guy giving some interview, and these kids walk in, and then his wife actually, like, runs in a panic trying to get them out of there, and it was like he was trying to stay composed
Oh,
and
really?
not, and it went absolutely all over the internet. And it's so funny because now it's like, well, that's just like your average Monday, right?
Yeah,
Like, that's just the way it
yeah,
is.
yeah,
Um, and hopefully, in many cases, there's a lot less judgment reserved for those who've had, interruptions from kids or pets or whatnot now today. since we've fused home and work so much. But kids don't get it. They don't understand that you're not available for them when you're in the next room. So that's been challenging. And then, of course, when you really do need to get something done, you have to resort to things that you wouldn't necessarily like to optimally. Like, here's an iPad, kid, because otherwise I know you're coming in, right?
Yeah.
Got to give you this like addictive substance, and so
Yeah.
you don't feel great about that, but you got to earn your paycheck. So it is what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. All right, we're going to move into a segment called Mo's Advice Corner. Okay, so I'm going to
Oh
ask you for
God.
some advice on a few different topics.
My advice is take none of my advice.
It's so funny. Some people are like, "Oh, I love giving unsolicited advice," and some people are like,
Oh,
"Oh God,
oof.
me." So, well, but
Grain of salt. Huge
great
grain of
assault.
salt,
Yeah.
people. Listen.
Yes. All right. So, first question. Well, I mean, look, you're the host of the It Gets Late Early podcast, right? So, what's an older fellow or an older gal to do if they are starting to feel some of these pressures of the ageism that you're talking about?
Get some Brotox, man. What can I say? I don't know. Like, it's actually funny. There's been an uptick. I don't know if it's funny. Person, dark humor again. I'm using dark humor, but I
Yeah.
guess there's been a huge uptick since the COVID pandemic in people working in tech, males working in tech, going to plastic surgeons, going to get Botox injections, which they appropriately refer to as Brotox. I think it's hilarious. So
I actually didn't
men
know.
are.
I didn't know what bro talks was. Like, you meant like bro talks, like talking to bros.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad that I clarified.
Yeah,
No, I mean
bro
like
talks.
literally neurotoxins that you inject in your face to look
Okay.
younger. So, or like to not have an
don't talk.
expression.
Don't talk to a bro.
Yeah, yeah.
Get
Don't
bro
talk to a
talks.
bro about Brotox.
Yeah.
Brotox. But yeah, no, I thought that was a pretty funny quip. But yeah, I would say that it's the thing that we all share, like ageism and marginalization due to your increasing age, because we live in a very ageist society, is the one thing we can kind of hopefully all like unite behind. And I'm seeing signs of it. There's a 72-year-old dude named Jerry who's going to be, or Gary, excuse me. I say Jerry because it's spelled Gerry. Sorry, Jerry. Gary. Gary is 72 and he's going to be the ABC's first Golden Bachelor. So, the Bachelor and the Bachelorette franchise that's been
Yes.
around forever. They have a
Yep.
Golden Bachelor now. So I'm like, okay, everyone's catching up. We're going to see representation across our media screens and whatnot with older people. Amazing. There's like the new Sex in the City. And just like that, there are 50 somethings. And you think about that representation of people in that age bracket versus what we saw with the Golden Girls. And it's like, these people are grandmas in the Golden Girls. And in Sex in the City, they are like out having dinner at the hottest places in New York City and like look incredible and like are living their best lives, right? So it's just like a different. I think we're catching up to allowing people to get older and celebrating them, right? Their wisdom.
Yeah.
I have countless other examples of this in society, which I'm like super heartened by and thrilled by. I just think tech is a little bit behind. But I feel like it's something that a lot of people don't really see coming. And I've been doing as much research as I possibly can on this subject. I've been putting out surveys to my community, and it's gone beyond that. And there's some really interesting takeaways from it. And I'm working with an inclusion researcher named Daniel Jolles out of the UK, who works at the London School of Economics Inclusion Initiative. And he is a fantastic person. He was on the podcast, one of the first episodes, actually. And he basically studies the value of experienced workers in the workplace. Fantastic human, actually, just great guy. So trying to work with him to glean insights from the survey data, because I'm not a statistician. I don't know anything. So working with people who have expertise, again, knowing your lane and staying in it, to try and deduce like what are the trends and the patterns that can be inferred from this data, right? So
Yeah.
but yeah, I will be doing some pieces on that in the near future. So
Awesome.
yeah.
What advice do you have for someone who's about to be a parent and still has a career they want to focus on?
Have realistic expectations and give yourself a lot of grace, because it's going to be messy and you're going to have incredible ups and downs and highs and lows that you can never even imagine.
Yeah.
It's coming. And surround yourself with as many people similarly situated, or people who've been there, done that, and ask for help, ask for advice, go in eyes wide open. Parenthood is incredibly, incredibly difficult, but also incredibly rewarding. And I think going in eyes wide open is something that I would recommend.
Yeah.
You're never fully prepared. All those cliches are freaking true,
Yep.
but I would just advise people to be a little bit more thoughtful about that, because I went in, I think, with like a very like blindly optimistic Pollyanna viewpoint, like, oh, it'll all be okay. Everybody has kids. It works out. And like, that's true. But also, it rocked me. Like, really, the anxiety that I felt after having a child. I mean, I was the person who had, maybe it was even clinically postpartum anxiety, honestly, but I was so terrified of SIDS that I went into my son's room and I would literally like wake him up when all I needed as a human being to be functioning at all properly was sleep myself. I would go in and accidentally wake him up because I was afraid he had died. Like,
Yeah.
constant. I bought every gadget, false alarm galore. My husband thought, he was like, "You're a crazy person." I was like, "Probably," like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, that's
probably
killer. That's killer.
it really
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
But go in eyes wide open. If you're prone to anxiety as I am, maybe do a little bit more. If you can, if your resources allow, get a gadget that will help put your mind to rest a little bit. By the time I had my daughter, I was able to get something that I think was called Owlet.
Yeah.
They should sponsor your podcast.
Yeah.
Owlet
Shout out
is a
to
little
Owlet.
yeah, Owlet. But Owlet had it was like this little booty that you put on
Yeah.
your baby's foot, and it would measure their heartbeat, and you had a connected app, and it would alert you if the oxygen levels were depleting in any way. And so you had that sense of security. So I was able to sleep a little bit more soundly. I mean, gosh, I should be getting paid by Owlet maybe. I mean, but honestly, it was really great. And do anything you can to make your life easier. I mean, truly. I was too late for the snoo, which is that sensation. Do you have the snoo?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, it's every friend that I know who's had it was like, that saved my life. So, and you could rent it, which I found out, which is better for the environment and more affordable. So, too late for me to benefit, but hey, enjoy.
Good tip. Hot tip. Yeah.
Hot
Rent a
tip:
snoo.
snoo and Owlet.
Yes. Our future sponsors.
Yeah, exactly.
What is the best advice you've ever received
In life or in parenting?
in life
In life, gosh,
or in anything?
man. It's a little bleak, but it could always be worse. Like, I don't know if that's advice so much as a saying that I love to turn to. Um, this too shall pass is another fave of mine, because it's true. You're going to get through it. I know because I've experience in getting through it. um, so, and certainly, I don't want to suggest that people won't find tons of joy in parenting. They will. There's tons of joy, but there's also a lot of hardship, and there's a lot of, I think it's really deep sort of core identity stuff that I think maybe is more something that happens to a woman. Maybe it's chemical, I don't know, but it's big, and you have to sort of reset your idea of who you are in the world and what you're all about, and that's a beautiful thing. It's like selflessness, but it's a transition, and it takes time, and it's not overnight that you get there. There are just a lot of what the f. Can I swear on your podcast? I don't know. Can I
Yeah.
swear?
Fuck. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sweet
Shit.
fuck. Thank you. There are a lot of what the fuck moments in parenting. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, yeah. And then, oh, I think my other advice is to any expecting mothers who are listening to this podcast: run, don't walk. Go get Emily Oster's book, Expecting Better, because guess what? There's a better way to be pregnant. Like, we have so far to go in terms of giving care to women who are pregnant, and the advice that you get from doctors, well-meaning, many of them, is so, it falls so freaking short. Like, it's crazy. And Expecting Better helped me calm the fuck down on so many things, and it really, it contextualizes everything. So one
Yeah.
takeaway from the book, for example, is that potassium in excess is extremely dangerous to a fetus. Have you ever heard one doctor say, stay the fuck away from bananas the entire pregnancy? Like, don't eat one? You've never heard that,
No.
right? And
Yeah.
yet that's the way they view like alcohol. And I remember distinctly when I was pregnant, I went to a wedding in France, and I said, "Hey, I'm pregnant. I'm barely showing. I'm only 2 months in." And they said, "Congratulations," and shoved a glass of champagne in my hands. And it's so different. It's all
Yeah. It's
relative,
different.
and
It's different over there.
it's
Yeah.
different, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just, but their babies are fine. And, you know, it's just, I was so highly anxious that by the end of my pregnancy, my own OB said, Maureen, you need to have a glass of wine. I'm not telling you to drink a bottle, but go have a glass of wine. You need to calm the fuck down. And I was like, thank you. Like, it's just, we need to contextualize this advice and understand where it's coming from. And the lack of data that powers so much of the advice that we're given as moms is just,
Yeah.
it's astounding. But you can't exactly do like ethical studies on like what happens if we give an expected mother all this horrible stuff, or
I
like
know that's the
seemingly, you know,
problem.
you
Yeah, you
can't do
can't
it.
test it. Yeah, yeah, for
So
sure.
better safe than sorry. But if you're highly anxious, I highly recommend that book. um
Okay, awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, hey, this has been a really great conversation. Where can people go to connect with you or learn more about you or the podcast?
So you can go to any of your favorite podcasting platforms, but you can also go to itgetslateearly.com and you can find all of the things there. I'm also on LinkedIn, Maureen Clough. I'm sure you can link that stuff in the show notes. But if you're interested in the topic that I'm exploring on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. If you have stories, if you want to be a part of it, I would welcome you to join the conversation.
Awesome. Maureen Clough, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you, Tone.